Hello, and welcome back to the Event Modeling and Event Sourcing podcast with Adam and Martin. Thank you, Martin, for joining us and everyone in your evening time. So,
Yeah,
always a nice end of your weekend or
yeah,
your
my
weekend.
absolute pleasure. I've been looking forward to this the whole week.
Yeah, it is fun. I do enjoy these chats. It's quite a lot of fun. So,
Yeah,
yeah, we have some announcements, Martin. Maybe we can start with those. So.
yeah,
Um,
crazy thing happened. The book is back on number one on Leanpub. I wouldn't have never expected that. So it seems like event sourcing is still a thing out there, and we are closing in on 700 copies sold, which is really absolutely amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm incredibly happy that first of all, the format of the book is incredibly inviting. So I think there has been really good books out there on event sourcing. I think,
Yeah,
but I think the format that you provided, walking this, creating this application, and explaining the patterns quite visually. I think I'm biased, obviously, saying that event modeling is helping that because we can see the examples in more in a format that people like, the storyboard format. So I'm hoping that that approach is helping explain event sourcing. And so, yeah, I think people are starting to recommend this. I've seen some people saying that they're buying this book for every team member
yeah,
that they're
yeah,
working with. So that's really wonderful. And I think it's also an investment in the future because you're updating. This kind of is leaking into the next
yes,
announcement that we have. The reason to have the book is because you are adding the missing chapters about every month or so. So
yeah,
tell us
yeah.
about that.
Now we have already three chapters now. So the first one was metadata. Then we have security, and just today I finally finished handling sensitive data in GDPR. So I just sent it out today to the reviewers. They're looking at it. I hope I will add it tomorrow, or at least in the next few days, to the book.
That's wonderful, and that's a huge topic for a lot of companies.
Yeah,
Obviously, how you treat people's private data in your system. There's more and more laws regulating this, making sure that companies are able to scrub this. And this may be many reasons, right? You can have
yeah,
someone opting out of a service. You can have a service that a company is shutting down. So getting rid of that data from sitting there, and if it gets into bad hands, you want to make sure that people's private information is not there.
yeah,
So really important topic, and it's really good to see that event sourcing and event modeling both give you a way to implement a way to deal with this, but also with event modeling to communicate this throughout your organization to business people, to technical people, just exactly what the strategy means. So I think it's really good, and
yeah.
look forward to more chapters like this. I guess I'm doing an event modeling update. We're going to cover some of the topics that will be in that chapter today. So yeah, that's pretty exciting. And then you have another chapter after this scheduled.
Yeah, I mean, a few days ago, I already asked on LinkedIn what should be the next chapter. It was pretty clear. It will be event sourcing and user interfaces. So, how do you combine the asynchronous backend with the front end? What possibilities do you have? How do I do it? Just a little bit of practical insights how this could be structured.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think aren't you using Next.js on for
I'm
your
using
project?
Next.js, yeah. So part of the discussion will be I'm using a lot of server-sent events to notify the front end to just
Hmm.
update after something changed, and I will just explain how I do it. Basically, I think
Yeah,
it will be
I think
pretty.
we started with React
Yeah,
and hooking up to Postgres for the read models, all behind an API layer, obviously, and then
yeah,
Event Store was our default before. I guess it's called Current now.
yeah,
Um, but it really doesn't matter. So yeah, I mean, we've I think some of our clients are using Next.js as well, so we're doing that too. Yeah, but we definitely started with React. Of course, for our educational stuff, I'm doing traditional posts and gets for entire
it's also
page
fine. That's
refreshes.
also fine. Absolutely.
But I kind of wanted people to not get lost in the land of JavaScript frameworks to learn the concept. So I think a post and a get is pretty easy to understand
Yeah.
for most people. So, but that's really exciting. So this user interfaces and event sourcing is also something that people really want to understand well. So I'm certainly looking forward to that chapter. And
If I had to guess, I think this is the question that gets asked the most. So how do you do this? How do you notify the front end if something changes?
mm-hmm.
Because obviously you can't just submit a command and get the data back. This will not work. So
Yeah.
how do you actually do it? And
Yeah, we definitely get that. I mean, this leaks into this. Is everything asynchronous? Is
yeah,
everything pub sub, or do we have synchronous stuff? And
yeah,
this, I keep answering these questions year after year. So it'll
absolutely.
really be nice to point people to a chapter. So I'm
Yeah,
also looking forward to contributing some of my thoughts if you'll allow them.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I guess we don't have this written down formally, but we are working on the schedules for. By the time you're hearing this, there will be a schedule for next year. So the big items on there are obviously for Martin's time zones, and I'll be there in person. There will be a conference, an event modeling conference in Munich. Exact dates probably will be on the website when you're listening to this, and then of course, there will be another one in Vancouver, making this an annual thing now on a nice event modeling / event sourcing conference with a workshop. Not sure if we're going to do the full 5 days, maybe do the 3 full days. We'll get some feedback and make that decision. So hopefully you'll see something by the time that you're listening to this. And of course, we also have an online one, which will be in January. I
Yeah.
think we're going to probably split it into 2 to give people a choice for
Beginner,
beginners
at
and
least one
advanced.
beginner. Yeah,
This
absolutely.
time, which we learned, it was still fun, but this time it's going to be. You'll definitely have a choice, and so you can send colleagues to the intro one if they're interested, but they have never done it. And then, of course, if you want to extend your knowledge, the advanced one will be perfect for you. So that's in January, and obviously we haven't planned for September, but I'm sure we'll have throughout the year more opportunities for this. We may also play around with some different times of the day so that it's easier for people to attend and also use their discretionary funds. And there's some regulations that some companies have that if you're doing training, it's got to be during the week or something like this. So we'll try to make it easier for you to do those things. So yeah, I think that's it for the announcements, right, Martin?
Yeah, I think so. One thing is sure, there will be a lot of event modeling and event sourcing in 2025.
It
That's for
seems
sure.
like it. With the way the book is going and how many people are looking at this, hey, this stuff actually works by default
Yeah,
for a lot of
exactly.
these information systems we've been dealing with. So that's exciting for me. I always thought that would be a really good thing in the industry, and I love seeing it happen in front of my eyes. And that's of
Me too.
course thanks to this amazing book, Martin. So thanks for that. It's making everyone's lives easier that's in this space to even bring this topic up, which was
Yeah.
10 years ago, it was 15 years ago, it was an uphill battle, and now it's much easier thanks to this. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and this makes me so happy. I cannot tell
Yeah.
you how happy that makes me.
Yeah. So what's our first topic today? Let's get into uh, given when thens and
Oh
given
yeah,
thens. So
beautiful.
yeah, this is so testing has always been an incredible benefactor of event sourcing and event modeling. If you're watching this and not listening to it, behind me are kind of some of these given thens and given when thens. To the right of my ear or to my left, I'm not sure if I have a mirror image I'm looking at. I think I'm looking at a mirror image, so I think it's to my left. I don't know. But you see these little
Yeah,
timelines, and I think some people get confused. It's like, I thought you had one timeline in event modeling, but you seem to have these little vertical pieces of information flow somewhere in the middle. And those are expanded scenarios, because the top of the workflow is really just the happy path, what guides you in terms of understanding what the system's supposed to do. It's not trying to be complete in terms of all the possible branches of logic that you might take. Obviously, that is more of a tree type structure. If you think about a system having different decisions at different points in the workflow, different pieces of data. You can have, relatively speaking, for what appears to a human, that's an infinite amount of possibilities. Not something you're going to be able to write down. So we focus on one at the top. That workflow in an event model is really moving left to right on a storyboard, showing examples of what the typical use case would be of going from in the system from start to finish.
Yeah.
That is the backbone
I
of
typically call it the
understanding.
good case. Typically, we are looking at the good case. So
Yeah,
that,
sunny path, whatever you call it. It's the intent of the system. So yeah, while there may be some exceptions that are thrown here and there, and bad
yeah,
input or other things that happen, we want to stay clear of those to not muddy the waters in the understanding of, like, okay, if everything goes well, this is what the system's supposed to be, and end to end. We want our customers to have this experience starting our system and ending up here at the other side with all the benefits that they've generated along the way and the value they realized. But of course, the devil's in the details that you have to take care of, alternate workflows and alternate data and things like this. So I always use this example of, well, how many different forms of the invoice can someone see? Well, we can get some stories elaborated on that invoice slice. And that particular part where we show the invoice, down below, we can look at this history of all the different things that can happen. People adding products to their cart, and people
yeah.
adding
Discount.
discount codes, and business rules that are hit, such as volume discounts and extra shipping costs for different products. All of these things have an impact of what you're going to see on the invoice, and really most importantly, obviously, is the final price on that invoice. And so we
Yeah,
need to get this right, and having just the happy path is not enough to show the variation that you're going to have on this invoice. And so one of the tests that we have is a given then, which is given a history of all the things that you've done that affect an invoice. What does that invoice look like at each stage? So you can go through these events chronologically and paint a bunch of crazy scenarios that you can think of, and this green box that is shown along the way kind of shows the content of that invoice, and so you can really match the impact of each action that someone has taken in the system. You can match that to the impact that it will have on their invoice, and that's a really good specification for someone that's implementing this invoice. It's also a really good reference for business people that want to ask the hard questions. Well, how are we handling, this situation when someone has got, they got this coupon, but then they also went to this other promotional thing. Do we allow these two promotions to go together? How does this show on the invoice? We can also explain that to them.
yeah,
But the powerful thing is that we're using that same explanation to guide the implementation and to talk to business, right? Again, this whole idea is that we're really experiencing this side-by-side collaboration between the two sides, meaning that it's quite a good bridge. And so that's one example. But we also have the other example of someone trying to maybe apply a coupon and getting that coupon rejected because they already had a coupon that is not compatible with other coupons. Something like a 50% off. That's a big discount. So you probably want to have a business rule that say, well, if you use this coupon, you cannot add any others.
yeah,
So those types of rules are kind of on. If you're watching again, it's on the side here with the blue boxes and the yellow boxes and the red boxes, which the red boxes are kind of new. They're the exceptions because the given when thens are kind of given a certain event history. When I do something, then I either get success, which is the storage of another event, or I have an exception, which is this red box. So there's a nice convention that we came up with. I think I had to really go through the code a few times to see what's natural, and go through the event model a few times to see what really feels good. And we kind of came up with a nice convention that these rows in this vertical timeline that we put below each step of the workflow to express it, it makes sense for the given part to be the previous rows. So that's a good convention, because now our test runners can always just use an accumulator to add events, and that can always be done after the test is run to add to the history of accumulating these events to do the next test. And so essentially, this test framework that I kind of came up with over the last couple of weeks now looks at a slightly different convention. We had the current row for the state views, looking at all the events, including the current one and the current row, to then do an assert on what's in the green box on that same row.
Yeah,
Well, that's changed now. We ignore the current event that is next to the green box, and we only look at the past rows, the rows above it, as what builds up the history. The reason that we did that is because we can keep the same convention for the given when thens, which are slightly more complicated because you have three things: given, when, and then, where you have to look at the history from the previous rows. Then you look at your when, which is your blue box, and then you are either asserting that an exception happened, which is on that same row, or there's an event on that same row, but not both, and assert that that event is emitted. So this allowed a much simpler test runner, which would go through these timelines and accumulate the previous rows as history, and then do the assertions on the current row. So did that make sense? It's kind of hard to explain in a podcast.
I think you need to put in a few pictures, at least for the people watching this on video to see it. But this makes a lot of sense, and I'm surprised again how easy it is to write these test cases and how readable it becomes. This is one of the biggest benefits.
Absolutely, and the ease of this is actually shown through how much AI is able to auto-generate. I was on another call this week with someone from the original signers of the Agile Manifesto, talking about TDD and testing and all of this kind of stuff, which I have a strong opinion that TDD is overused for a lot of design, and it doesn't actually, it's not what people are advertising. I mean, it's fine, it's compatible. I'm just kind of critical of people pushing it too far. But so I have these talks with someone. I had a talk with Joshua Kirievsky, who's done a lot of this given, when, then stuff, etc. So it was a real pleasure to connect with him a couple of weeks ago. But then another person from the original Agile Manifesto signatories had a call, and it was really cool to kind of show them that, this TDD stuff, this test before implementation, just how much the AI can look at a timeline and understand so much more. So I'm just absolutely floored how well it nails the implementation. When you do tests that are really easy to read and understand, the implementation pops out. Like it's all that TDD red green refactor cycle is condensed into like no time at all. It's
the implementation is like a side effect of it, right?
It is. It's just, I mean, the first time it surprised me, like because first of all, we're dealing with event sourcing, which is a little bit different. It's off the beaten path, obviously, and then we have our own convention like that we're talking about here for the given when thens. And not only did I not specify this in text, I gave it a picture and pasted the screenshot of what we did in the event model, and it nailed the implementation 100%. So it's quite good. I think what we're seeing, whether it's AI or real people doing this work, we're seeing that being very clear in your specification directly correlates to how good your solution is going to be, how well your project will run, how reliable your system is. It all goes back to how you express what you want. And I think there's been a lot of blame in the industry when you have silos of people and things being thrown over the fence. But when you really have this collaborative approach where everyone understands what you want, we're really seeing that this clarity of specification is a requirement for any real system that you want to depend on. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think AI is the perfect playground for this, because AI is like this child that you need to explain very, very clearly what it needs to do. And if you manage to do this, it will actually do what you want it to do. But if you fail to explain it clearly, it will do anything, hallucinating, do crazy stuff. And I mean, that's a perfect proof. Just give it this picture, and even the picture is enough to tell it exactly what it should do. And it
Yeah.
understands it because it's such a clear and visual language that anybody can understand it. And if AI can understand it, also the business people can. And this
Yeah.
is what.
I was actually quite floored too that because I'm saving some of this. Well, the event model is saved in Draw.io, which is an XML formatted file that's in the same repo. So I'm using Cursor AI as the IDE. It actually looks at the XML, so it's been pulling out some of the names I'm using in the events for the suggestions that it's giving. So it's already
Yeah.
using. Now imagine if there's even better structure to the event model. It's
I
going to
mean,
be amazing.
I'm doing the same. I'm doing the same. I'm just using JSON. So I'm exporting the model to JSON, and you can feed the whole JSON just
Yeah,
into a model, and you can ask it questions. So what will happen next? What's the missing slice here? And it will
yeah,
answer. And most often it's right. It will
yeah,
choose the right commands. It will choose the right events. It will choose the right terms, the right
yeah.
fields. So it's pretty impressive what is possible if you give it the right context.
Yeah, I think it's also come a long way, though, to be honest, because trying this for the first time a year ago, it wasn't as with
Yeah.
ChatGPT
Yeah.
3.5 and all this. It was nowhere near this. But then again, I don't think we were working with these. You're exporting to JSON. I'm using the XML format in the Draw.io. I think we didn't. We were trying it with just prompts back then.
Yeah. I mean,
Now
a
we have
year
better
ago,
support.
a
Yeah,
year ago you did not have the context size you need for this. So putting in a
that's true.
JSON, you need a pretty big context size so the model can really understand what this is.
Yeah, so that's another thing to kind of battle with is like how do you keep things readable and try not to take shortcuts for using symbols. And you kind of don't want to use symbols. You want things that'll catch some of these correlations that the models have been trained on. Because I think one of the biggest benefits with these given when thens being written this way is that they follow human language. And I think the more you do that, the more benefits you'll get from the large language models, which have the statistical connections there for what will happen next in even your own domains. There probably are enough discussions out there that it'll make some really interesting connections for you. It certainly did. I mean, one of the things that just to finish this topic off, when I had those given whens or given thens for the first time I pasted that into the IDE, that picture, it floored me by giving me an extra assert that I didn't think of
Yeah,
in terms of making sure something was not in a collection after I renamed it.
yeah,
That was one assert I missed. We're going to make mistakes as humans. I missed this one assert that I think was quite important. It gave it to me.
yeah,
So it's really something. So I'm really looking forward to this. And again, one last thing on this convention is that this last change that we're talking about here, having the previous rows being part of the history, now that the convention is really the same for the given when thens as it is for given thens, your AI tooling, whether it's the Cursor AI or something else, now it doesn't have to switch modes in terms of thinking. So it can always think of the previous rows as the given.
yeah,
And this consistency should allow not just you, but the AI to really kind of more easily interpret what's there. So
yeah.
anyway, looking forward to publishing something. I think this is really good for the newsletter as well. So I think I'll record something for that,
Yeah,
and we can put in the
definitely.
newsletter.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I will work with a team tomorrow, and I might try this new approach. Let's see if that works. So
Yeah,
they are
I
not.
think it's quite nice. I think this convention is like history is the previous rows. That is
Yeah,
the definition of history. So I think it's good.
we'll see.
All right. So next topic. Oh, compare and swap. What does that mean? And Paxos and Raft. Okay. So
Well,
I had a
that's
really good discussion. I think you can see it in the live stream recordings. I think it's from Saturday, yesterday, and that was with Yordis, who is an excellent contributor to the space. He's the one that really pushed the question about upcasters, which we
Yeah,
covered
cluster topic.
last
Yeah.
episode. So it was really fun to connect with him for about an hour online, and he's working on an auction system. And so we got into some interesting topics on compare and swap and Paxos and Raft and all these technical things. And I think,
That's interesting. That these are
yeah,
topics which you don't have every day in your daily work. So
no,
I mean, I know what these algorithms do. I know how they basically work, but I'm by no means an expert because I don't deal with them every day. At least not in the implementation. I mean, I work a lot with Apache Kafka, which uses Raft in the background and stuff like that. But implementing this yourself, that's interesting.
yeah. I mean, I think it's really a good experiment for people to do and to
Yeah,
see what they are, because I mean, understanding something that's behind the technology you use, I think, is a good advantage. Even if you don't write it every day, I think it's good to understand what's going on
yeah,
behind the scenes. It's certainly, at the going back to 2008, I got introduced to, well, I discovered Paxos as I was trying to think of how event sourcing is going to end up working to scale to large systems and be more dependable with multiple nodes. And so we had this leader election and all of this stuff. So I went down the rabbit hole a long time ago. um, None of these implementations I've had to run in production systems, as you say, but it certainly did allow me to understand with full certainty that this approach of event sourcing answers scaling for both reads and writes. So as you have a system that's heavy for writes, especially, you need to really understand, which node is the leader, like
yeah,
what type of participation do the extra nodes have as they take things. And so if you listen to that stream, I think it's 2 hours in, maybe 1.5 hours in, when Yordis jumps on, and we discussed this with the domain of auctions. And auctions obviously have this spike of traffic. If you look at eBay, maybe there's a bunch of auctions that end exactly at 5 p.m. And so your system must always be built for the capacity at the peak throughput. And this throughput is transactions. And we had the same thing at Pay by Phone, where everyone's paying for their parking in London, which is a lot of people, right around 8 a.m. when the parking meters are in effect, right? So
yeah,
you always have to build your system for the maximum throughput, even though most of the time it's just sitting there
yeah,
spinning idly during the middle of the hours or middle of the night or whatever. But as a global organization with a centralized set of servers, obviously you start to get sprinklings of there's rush hour somewhere in the world at any time. And so they even out. The same thing with with global auctions. You're going to have definitely a little bit more of a spread out of traffic. But still, there's those peak end of hour and things like that, because when do you want your auction to end? Obviously, you're not going to pick 5:32. You're going to say this auction ends at 5, and most people
yeah.
will default to like an end of an hour to end their auctions. And so that was a really good topic, and we got into how can you actually event model, the three nodes. You kind of always want to have an odd number of nodes in these write
Yeah,
first systems so that you don't have the split brain problem, which means if you have an even amount of nodes and you have them voting on the true value being A or B, and they're split exactly halfway, you can't make a decision which is right. It's entirely random, so it creates a lot of problems. So you'll always see an odd number of nodes
yeah,
for scaling the right side for this reason. The odd number is always so you have a clear winner. So we discussed, how do you event model this? And one of the things that we talked about was, if these events are going to be replicated across these nodes, you want to probably have 3 swim lanes to show the same event
yeah.
being
That
stored on
makes
a
sense.
different timeline there.
Absolutely.
I also talked about making this visible. So slow down the time. Let's not talk about milliseconds at the end of the hour, but let's talk about kingdoms and horses and messages being passed from one kingdom to another. And then you can think of someone's going to sabotage the message. They're going to kill the messenger on the way because it's on horseback. So maybe the king wants to send 2 messengers taking 2 alternate paths to send the message to another kingdom, right? So we start talking about dispersing copies of the command. Maybe there's a router at the top where you actually want the command to go to multiple nodes and not just pick one. And then because in an auction you don't want you want that five nines or more of uptime. And if one of these nodes collapses in the last second of an auction, how do you ensure that the other two are working correctly, right? Do you have a predetermined set of who is the leader, who is right? Because you are losing a third node, you're immediately put into split brain while you wait for
Yeah.
another node to spin up or be brought in. Maybe you have a fourth sitting on the side that, with the death of one, you immediately rope that one in. So, do you have a spare fourth, which is hot in that moment, right? We didn't actually get to that topic, but it's something to consider, to have things that are ready to go into the pool if something would happen. And then you're talking about how much of the event stream do you have? You start to think about carry forward balances, so the events are more of a ledger, so that you do fewer calculations in these high throughput systems. But it's really good to see and show that event modeling even works at this level, using the swim lanes to show three separate nodes, but then also swim lanes on the top. So in this auction system, you would have two bidders kind of trying to outbid each other in the last seconds to get some highly sought out product. But
Yeah.
also the two other swim lanes at the top for the UI that we added was the system operator screens. Let's say you do have a slow system like a kingdom and a horse and all this. You want to have three separate dashboards, one for each node, right? And maybe a fourth one if you think about the one that's on standby. When it kicks into action, what is it getting? How is it responding to these things? And for a domain like an auction, this sounds highly technical, but I think there's a point to make this mechanism available to the business to understand. If your business is Ticketmaster or your business is auctions, you do want to have some of this technical stuff presented in a human understandable way to the business, so that they understand why their SLAs are the way they are, why they are able to make certain legal claims, accounting claims, etc. To that. So I think event modeling stretches a little bit more to be helpful, to make the esoteric technical things more human friendly for business to appreciate, how the system works and why we offer the value that we offer, and make more informed business decision based on what it is that is actually flowing at those very key moments. So I think that was a really good discussion. And so,
Oh, nice. Yeah. I'm looking
yeah,
forward to this. Definitely. That sounds interesting. I need to
I
catch
mean,
up.
that's a rabbit hole. I mean, you could have an entire book scaling,
Yeah,
extreme
absolutely.
scaling using event sourcing. I mean, this might be a missing chapter. You can talk about extreme scale, where we talk
This
about
is already on the back.
redundant nodes and all sorts of things like that. And
That's already on
we
the back talk. I think we need to talk about this. And
yeah, it's a highly technical one, but it's really
yeah,
fun because, I mean, a lot of this stuff has been solved years and years ago with actual CPUs supporting operations such as compare and swap, right? Which
yeah,
means that you do have this contention for someone trying to change the same thing to two different values. And so one of the core concepts is this compare and swap, which means at the processor level, you look at the existing value. And so your instruction always says, what do you expect the current value to be? And if it is so, change it to this, right? So that unlocks a lot of this contention stuff.
yeah,
And so if one process or one thread gets to that, gets to execute that first, obviously the second one doesn't get to do it because the comparison fails and there was no swap of values, right? And so the fact that we can go down to the binary comparison there, to resolve these issues, it's kind of neat. And so we also did some chat GPT questions about that, like give me some C code or some Golang code or Rust code to go down to the processor level instruction of compare and swap as an example. So what really makes me mad is that I didn't have chat GPT back in 2008
yeah.
to ask these questions, because there's Leslie Lamport's work on Paxos is that would have been part of the search results that would have been used to train chat GPT, and it is. And so if you ask any of these things, just I remember trying to make an example Paxos implementation. I think James Nugent, who worked at EventStore, did like a JavaScript kind of graphical HTML thing to show the
Yeah,
messages
we also
passing for leader
do.
election and all that kind of stuff. But those types of things are so much more easily achieved today without scouring for 4 hours online to find
Yeah,
how these algorithms work and then how to implement them. So I'm
I cannot
really,
even imagine how complicated that was back
yeah.
then. I remember also at one point I tried to really get deep into Paxos and really understand how it works, and it took me hours and hours to really figure it
Yeah,
out. Today it would
yeah.
be faster.
Yeah, I mean, it might. I think eventually it'll make a missing chapter in the book. Maybe not just in the next few months, but eventually, maybe it'll be a different book. We'll see. I'm happy to talk about these things, but it's good to know for people that are just they don't care about this because they're just running a regular business. The thing that you need to take away from this conversation is that if you are doing event modeling and event sourcing, there is no ceiling for your scalability. Effectively, you are building your systems in a way that allow you to introduce the infrastructure that will carry your business as it is for the most part without many changes to what you're talking about in terms of your requirements and all that, which is not true for a lot of these crud systems. You have a lot of core hard problems with nasty schema migrations and unfortunately, a lot of times with these CRUD systems, you're dealing with a complete rewrite for entire systems or entire big subsets of your system to attain these scalability goals. Where if you start with event modeling and event sourcing, you really don't have to worry, relatively speaking, about those things like compared to any other approach. And you hear
Yeah,
of MVPs and proof of concept stuff. We're reusing this stuff all the time, and we're quite happy to keep going with the same approach. And in our experience, solving these problems for businesses, we didn't really have to change how we develop when we were looking at developing a trading platform, right? Where we had a lot of this performance stuff. It was quite nice to not have to think a different way just because this domain
mm,
required this level of throughput. So anyway, that's my
yeah.
2 cents. How about
I,
your experience in this, like
I
high?
think I find it so fascinating the discussion about the bidding platform and stuff like that. You can really simulate super complex systems very, very easily without writing code. Just
Yeah,
just on a whiteboard. You can go through the whole system and analyze every single aspect of the system without writing a single line of
yeah,
code. And that is so
definitely,
amazing.
definitely can analyze things to a level of giving business the sort of proof that if we start developing this way, then yes, we have these requirements to make sure that our auctions don't have a bad experience for our users. That's really interesting. I like that.
Yeah, uh, me too. So I say often to people interested in event modeling is like coding, just without the code. It's
Yeah,
really fast. It's so fascinating to me.
yeah. um, yeah, it's kind of this whole conversation took me back to the original days of looking at event sourcing, because I think back in those days people were only concerned about this performance thing, and they were only thinking about, oh, this event stream is getting long, how is that going to scale? It's like, oh, yeah, that's
Yeah, we need so much memory and stuff like that.
yeah. So it's nice to be past all that, but it did take me back there to those early discussions. So
Yeah.
anyway, that was fun. And again, that discussion is captured in the stream from Saturday, December, what was it, 14th, December 14th.
Very
So if you
nice.
look at my live streams, if you look at the one from December 14th, it's somewhere in the middle if you're really curious about that discussion. So all right, next topic, event sourcing frameworks. What does
Yeah,
this mean?
I brought that topic up uh, a few days ago. I just mentioned in the chat that people really need to stop writing event sourcing frameworks. I don't know why that happens, but uh, it it comes up to me. People are starting to write event sourcing frameworks, and there are two new frameworks every week, at least. People are investing a lot of efforts into writing event sourcing frameworks. And I'm not really sure why this happens. Because, in my opinion, you don't need any event sourcing frameworks. Either you use a framework that is already there, like I do, for example, with Axon. That's a framework that is just battle tested and it's already there. Or you don't use a framework at all because actually you don't need one
Yeah.
typically.
I that's my approach to it. I really don't see the need for one except in specific cases, and those cases may be human. I mean, it may be that you already are in an organization where some people are used to a certain language or framework, and in that stack, there's something that the community is adopting, and so that might give some benefit of familiarity or something like that. But for the most part, I really one of the reasons I'm doing the live streams just to show all of the small details being implemented is to give people the view that this stuff isn't complicated.
Yeah.
Really, storing one more item on a event stream as a file or something is a very simple process that'll get you going. And what I really want people to understand is that as you change quote unquote frameworks or implementations or migrate things over, these events stay the same. The functions stay the same. You can move from something that you host to a serverless environment very smoothly without any interruptions. So
Yeah.
I think that highlights the amount of confidence you should get to not have to use a framework, like you said. And even if you write your own, you get something wrong. When you fix it, it works. And the nice thing is that it automatically works across for all of your workflow. So, our own, and it's one of the reasons we didn't really open source our own internal stuff, because there's not much value, and all it would do is invite a whole bunch of questions about extending it or other things. And we see it as incredibly simple. So we don't need documentation on it. But if the minute we made it open source, we would have documentation to maintain and all that. So
Yeah, of course.
really, I think we also capture the fact that an event sourcing framework is not that valuable, which is interesting. It is valuable. I mean, the approach is incredibly valuable, but there's definitely a difference in adopting an event sourcing framework versus adopting a specific type of database, let's say it's Postgres or SQL Server or Oracle. There's big impacts there where I just don't really see the same level of risk with choosing a different event sourcing style, whether it's your own or whatever. And I think there's a problem there. I think the other thing that I think I've seen over the years is that the word framework was really used a lot to talk about the infrastructure, the pub subs, and how the sockets are going to connect, and node discovery and guaranteed of delivery, and all of these things were kind of more on the infrastructure side. Whereas I think when people are talking a little bit more about the event sourcing frameworks, they kind of want to have more. I think they're talking more about conventions for command handlers and things like that. I don't know. It's all over the place, but I'm I'm quite happy to not be really opinionated about it. If you really wanted a framework, you can use one, but I certainly don't see it as a requirement.
I think it's a sign of uncertainty. That's at least my theory. I think engineers who start with event sourcing, they don't really know how to get started. So they do what they can do best, and this is technology. So they start just building a framework to see how it works.
Yeah.
In my mind, it would be much more beneficial if they just modeled a real world application using event modeling and translate it to a running application without a framework. Just get started and do it. Don't write a framework. That would be much more beneficial, and you would learn so much with it.
Exactly. And it's one of the reasons I'm doing the live streams all the time, is to just show that, I want people to be frustrated with how slow I'm going, because they can see my code. It's like, oh, that's the mistake there. You go do that. And
Nice.
You can see that even a dummy like me can do this. Like it's really, and I say that I have experience coding, but I don't code every day because I own a business that I have to run now. It's not the same thing as it was many years ago. But I want you to kind of, while you're watching me struggle through the code, I want you to understand that just imagine the person that is coding every day. These things that take me 2 hours are going to be 2 minutes for someone that already has this. And that's where you're going to get this benefit of these slices and, understanding an event model and translating it to that. It's, what you're seeing is a very slow motion capture of what's going on. And I'm doing it on purpose. And I actually want people to see that even as I even did .NET the other day for the first time in a long time. I think the last time I did Kestrel was like 2-3 years ago for the meetup because of COVID. And so going back to, .NET, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's .NET 8 or something like that, whatever. There's different C# syntax I haven't seen, so I'm clumsily stumbling along. But enough of the muscle memory for what event sourcing is helps
Yeah.
you out. And some of the little things do come back, like how do you do serialization.NET? All of a sudden, you have these attributes you got to sprinkle on. Probably in Java, it's similar stuff you would.
I mean, yeah. I mean, it was the same for me. I started. I read a lot of books about event sourcing, and I did not understand how it works. I really did not understand it. The only way to understand how event sourcing actually works is build something meaningful with it. Build a complete application with event sourcing. And I did this, and it took me ages. It took me ages to build this thing until it was running. But when it was finished, I knew exactly how event sourcing works. There were no open questions. Everything was clear. But it took me weeks to implement this application. Well,
Yeah. So frameworks, make your own, but also don't.
yeah, no,
I'm
I mean,
trying to. Yeah.
I
I'm
would
trying to
really, I
show
would really
conventions,
suggest
right?
not to build a framework. This is not a good way to learn event sourcing.
Yeah.
Build an application. Build something meaningful, something that works, something you can deploy.
Yeah.
That's the way to go.
I'm definitely. I mean, you can see in the live streams as I'm doing what you're suggesting, right? I'm building an application
Exactly.
for
Yeah.
the Open Spaces conference organization, just as a fun experiment, because we use that as part of the workshop domain as well, and we have for the last year or half year or so. And what's funny is that as you're building the application, the patterns fall out at you, right? It's really this
Exactly.
the dream of emergent design is actually happening, but
Yeah.
it's kind of backwards because what fell out, for example, was we talked earlier about this, the unit testing framework and the conventions of how you build up a history for your given. That convention fell out of actually implementing something. So it's really the sort of the best case of showing where emergent design might be good. Of course, you do have to step back and say, okay, some of these things, how we're going to take care of Paxos, for example, that's not going to really be something that emerges, but you can plunk it in. So I think, yeah, building real systems, like you say, is the only good way to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's our next topic? Fake events for running slices. Yeah.
What's a
Have
fake?
you made any fake events?
I use fake events all the time. Maybe we should explain what is a fake
Yeah.
event. So at least for me, oftentimes implementing a slice, sometimes the slices which produce the event you need as an input are not done yet.
Mhm.
And what I do then often is I use the Spring framework. So I'm on the JVM stack. I use the Spring framework, and on the Spring framework, you can just bootstrap something that fills the event store with events using a profile. So you can say, I want to run with the profile for a certain slice. And this profile has an initializer, which initializes the event store with a bunch of events. And then you can basically implement your slice, even if the other slices aren't done yet. So basically, for me, a fake event is just an event that is basically the contract. So events are the contract between these slices. So if the event is in the event store, you have everything ready to implement your slice, independent of everything else. So
Yeah, this is the bread and butter of how we work with clients, because the real benefit is you can jump into the most important slices in your workflow and show that they're actually operational. And for them to be demonstratable, you obviously have to have the supporting events already stored,
yeah,
so that when you go to that URL right at that point in the workflow and you show these set of screens actually working, you have the setup, right? And you already
yeah,
mentioned this contract. Like we always talk about, well, the beautiful thing about event sourcing and the slice approach is that you have this precondition and post condition that's so crystal clear to
yeah,
give you scope for your work within that slice, right? Where you can do whatever you want. You
beautiful.
want to do TDD in there, you want to do whatever in there. It's amazing. But this pre and post condition of what you have ready for you before your slice gets hit in the workflow, those events are there, and those fake events are perfect for that, as a way to say that I expect these things there for me so that my piece of work accomplishes its goals. But then
Yeah,
also for me, on the other side, how do I ensure for the next person that's working on the slice to the right of me gets what they want, right? And I can also use this as a communication mechanism, right? I can also see that, hey Tim, how are you doing this work here? It's like, oh yeah, here I can look at their branch and what they're committing, and I can cheat and like on a test and look at their answer, see what they put in their fake events, and like, oh, okay, that's what it's thinking. Cool. I'm gonna try and make sure that what I do puts that information in there. It's kind of fun too, right? So, but anyway, if the greater goal, of course, is that you're interpreting what's on the event model to actually be as well reflected in your implementation all the way along. So you're playing with the fake events based on what you're seeing on the event model.
Yeah,
So that's been a really important part of getting this cadence and making sure that all of these pieces really do click like Lego pieces together after. And so we also use these fake events. They're not really fake; they're kind of fake real for bootstrapping entire installations. So much like you would have a prepped database for a traditional application with some default records in there for maybe a user such as admin with, like, change me for the password for the first one. So you run it and you change the password for your admin, and then you start to add real users and you start to add products. There may be some default lookups that you want, maybe taxes that you want to have that are there already. You don't have to have people configure the software too much. So a lot of that we would quote unquote script as initial events,
nice.
and we would just
Yeah,
this is kind of how we deploy all of our production systems for our clients, is that they get the storyline of like the assumed events that are there at the beginning, right? And we didn't have to go through a whole bunch of setup screens and admin screens, and they look like JSON files. It's kind of like your
yeah,
infrastructure as code, but it's really like your basic setup as code. But it's not really code. It's just this behavior captured as data. And as long as this whole system works, the good thing is that we're using the exact same mechanisms to set up a system that we use to run the system. Like, there's no difference. Like, we're not running a separate type of process altogether to set up a system. And then when the system is running, it's using something else. No, it's using the same thing. So that's
nice.
really nice.
That's
Yeah,
that's like a given for a production system. I like this a
it
lot.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a really good way to continue. Also, the way you explain the system is the same as well. So, like, what you find in those initial events is going to be identical to what's on the event model. So it's
yeah,
not, you can't really tell when those initial events were put in versus when the system started being used. Like, it feels natural, like it's part of the natural history of these events in the system. So that's also really good. So yeah, fake events for running slices is really good. And I think I've added, so my recent commits to this, just before I made the .NET implementation for Sebastian on our project. I did add, so I kind of gave a small convention. You can come up with your own, but I had a directory called fake events. And in that directory, there's a directory that corresponds to the slice you're working on. And so you could
yeah.
have,
That makes
for
sense.
example, I think we did the rooms view for our conference application. So the rooms URL always looks at a state view, which folds over all these room added, room renamed, room deleted events, and folds those events into what the current state of the room list is. So I added a whole bunch of, I think, 5 of these events to show a
Cool.
sample. And so and then I just have a little script. I haven't committed the script, but it's really about, you remove the event stream, you make the directory again, and then you just copy what's in the fake events directory, and that's enough.
Yeah,
And then you can press, type node app JS or whatever, it runs. You go to that URL, voila, there you see it. You can step through the code to see how the reducer works, and like you understand that you have an isolated environment where that slice works. You
yeah.
also see what it's based on in terms of what the other screens that create the rooms are going to make. So yeah. That works really
I mean,
well.
you can start your single slice. It behaves basically like a microservice, like a mini microservice. I love that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like serverless as well, kind of like a lot of patterns of really good methodologies, but it also does feedback to this is a storyline thing. They're events, so you're still looking at a bit of a subset of the timeline to make it work. So you're kind of looking at the events that are pertinent to this
Yeah,
slice in isolation. Obviously, they're going to get filtered out from like the main event stream, which is going to have a whole bunch of other stuff in there too, potentially. So it's yeah, I really enjoy this way of working. I
I mean,
can make a quick run. Yeah,
this beautifully shows the power of the combination of slices and event sourcing. This combination is just magical, if you ask me. So
yeah,
I cannot imagine working in a different way. Slices really change a lot when you
yeah.
apply them correctly.
Especially with event sourcing, the fact that I can without any distraction. I'm not going through many layers of abstractions to get at why my UI looks like this. It's really about I have okay, what am I looking at the UI? What reducer did it go through?
Yeah,
And then what data did that reduce? I really see
yeah.
those three components like right there in front of me. It's even a dumb guy like me can understand this. You know, it passes the dummy test.
Anybody can. That's the amazing.
Exactly. So even yeah, I mean, I'm saying this because I don't have the daily experience of coding for a client all the time anymore. But I do want to put myself in that seat, and I I listen to the feedback from the team, and I try to expose this to everyone through these streams, and I want to be I want to be the junior for people. I want to say, okay, is this easy to understand? Can someone that's new to programming understand this? Right? Is this going to be a real healthy shortcut to understanding state and progressing through a system that someone learning to code or automate systems is going to have an easier time? I always have to ask myself this question because I don't think it's fair to say that, oh, event sourcing is the best default if at the same time you know that it's difficult to learn. And I don't think that's the case. And so I want to be the dummy to show
Sure.
that yeah, even I can do it.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. I think it works. I think your
Yeah.
plan works.
Give us feedback on the Discord. Eventmodeling.org has all the links. There's a resources page which has the Discord link. So I'm looking forward to interacting with you if you're listening for the first time and seeing you on there, posting your questions and trying this stuff out. So
Yeah, and suggest topics. You can suggest. Don't forget, you can suggest topics what
yeah.
we should discuss here.
And in fact, that's where we're pulling these topics from is really, these discussions that we had with the community. So we don't want to be the ivory tower, quote unquote, thought leaders that are going to
No.
make up topics for you. We're highly influenced by the ebb and flow of information in the community as people are experimenting with new things, and the development world's changing. We have new respect for data, and AI has done a good job on that. So everything's new to everyone, and so it's nice to have this community involvement and people suggesting topics and talking about things. So we'll continue to do that. So Martin, thank you, and obviously people that
Yeah,
are listening,
thank you.
I hope you had a great holiday. The people that are listening, but for us, we're still in the past. So Martin,
Yeah,
and have
It's
a
difficult to.
wonderful Christmas break with your
Yeah, you
family
too.
and kids, and I'm sure it's going to be fun. And we're going to go back to live podcasts, almost recent podcasts in the new year. So
Yeah,
happy New Year to you, Merry Christmas to you, and we'll do these live ones in the new year.
exactly. Same for you, Adam, and see you in the new year then.
All right, bye.
Bye bye.